This is a triple slash of average, on base, and slugging. It's only 3 numbers, but there's a lot of information in here. Every single, double, triple, home run, walk, hit by pitch, and out is represented here in some way. And it comes together to paint a pretty clear picture of offensive production. You can also condense these 3 numbers into just one, wOBA, weighted on base average. But what if we took it a step further? Don't you think it'd be helpful to normalize wOBA, creating a new stat where 100 is always league average and giving us a tool to compare players and teams across different run environments? If you think that's a good idea, congrats! You've invented weighted runs created plus. You're a great sabermetrician. Everyone's always saying that about you. Since the American League was founded, the team with the highest WRC plus in MLB history is the 1927 Yankees. That passes the eye test. Their lineup, dubbed the Murderer's Row, has been considered by many to be the greatest ever, well before these advanced stats even existed. A 126 WRC plus suggests that, in a neutral ballpark, they'd expect to score 26% more runs than the league average team in 1927. With that in mind, here's the rest of the top 8 offenses in MLB history by WRC+. Can't quite put my finger on it, but you ever feel like something doesn't quite belong? Look who the 2020 Mets are rubbing elbows with. You've got multiple teams headlined by Ruth and Gehrig. You've got the 2019 Astros, which added Yordan Alvarez and Michael Brantley to an already scary core of hitters. They almost won the World Series, but then a cheerful wristwatch enthusiast named Howard said, "Doink!" 2017 Astros? Champions, allegedly. 2020 Dodgers? Champions, allegedly. 1976 Reds? You can't argue that one. They didn't even lose a playoff game. And then, the outlier to end all outliers, the 2020 Mets. They finished 4th in the National League East and failed to reach the playoffs in a year where the majority of teams attended, including the Marlins. The Marlins were there. Come on, guys, it's the freaking Marlins, and the Marlins were there. A team offense this prolific requires some huge individual performances. Jeff McNeil did his Jeff McNeil thing. Robinson Cano proved to be the cleanest hitter in MLB history. I'm talking about his swing, of course. Brandon Nimmo took a bunch of walks and stormed first base. Michael Conforto laid down a classic 3-4-5, real smooth. And Dominic Smith? Dom Smith's triple slash looked like this. He hit 21 doubles in 50 games. Over 10% of his plate appearances resulted in a 2-bagger. He was 6th in the league in WRC+. Dom Smith. Those 5 all had an OPS plus of 130 or higher. Only 2 teams in MLB history, the 1976 Phillies and 2014 Dodgers, had more hitters who were that productive. With a triple slash that looked like this, the Mets were doing everything right. They hit for average, they got on base, and they slugged, producing a 123 WRC+. Surely they led the league in runs scored, right? Actually, that was the Dodgers. Makes sense, they were also on the all-time leaderboard. And so in second place we had the Braves? Well, they were really good too. And so, Oh no. Not like this. Anything but this. Yep. The supposed 5th best offense in MLB history by WRC+, scored the 13th most runs in 2020. May I remind you that the R in WRC+ stands for runs. Where have the runs gone? I swear I just had them a second ago. Folks, this 2020 Mets offense was good, but they were not clutch. Now, you need to establish a baseline performance to understand clutch. For example, you might say that the most unclutch teams are the ones who hit poorly with runners in scoring position. Last year, that was the Pirates, but the Pirates were also bad in any situation. So they weren't necessarily unclutch, they were just kinda generally bad. Even great, clutch playoff hitters like Derek Jeter tend to have regular season stats that are basically the same, albeit against weaker competition. Are they super clutch, or are they just really good no matter what? Clutch would be someone who greatly exceeds their baseline performance level in high-stakes situations. With the bases empty, the 2020 Mets had a baseline performance nothing short of legendary. Their .285, .360, .483 triple slash matched the career of Eddie Murray. It's preposterous, really. With the bases empty, the entire team collectively hit like a first-ballot Hall of Famer. In terms of OPS plus over that split, only the 1927 Yankees were better. Again, this is the murderer's row. There have been 8 players in MLB history with a 1200 OPS in a season. And in 1927, the Yankees had a lineup with 2 of them. And the other guys weren't slouches either. If you add another column for team winning percentage, the 2020 Mets really stick out because they're quirky and they're not like other girls. So, the Mets had no trouble getting on base in the first place. The next step is figuring out how to drive them in. And this is where the Mets fell from being comparable to the 1927 Yankees to eerily similar to the average team in 2020. With runners on base, they were no longer Eddie Murray. They were average. "Oh, doctor, please, my offense, it's very sick," because a runner gets on base and it gets worse? It gets worse against the sample of pitchers who allow base runners, meaning things aren't going great for them and now they have to pitch out of the stretch. It's a whole ordeal. Look, Major League hitters in 2020 added about 20 points of average on base and slugging with ducks on the pond, but not the Mets. And then, there's the classic clutch situation, where heroes are made. Runners in scoring position, 2 outs. You need a base hit. A productive out won't cut it. How did the Mets do? Okay, so we're starting the rally like Eddie Murray, and we're ending the rally like Jim Canavan. I don't know who Jim Canavan is. This is the story of the 2020 New York Mets, a team that gets on base, then immediately starts crying and soiling itself. Again, by some measures, one of the greatest offenses in MLB history, yet somehow unable to turn that offense into runs. We're back on that WRC+, which is based on weighted runs created, which is based on wOBA, which is based on the triple slash, which is based on the novel Push by Sapphire. Weighted runs created is a context-independent stat. The triple slash knows that you hit a home run. It's reflected in your batting average, on base percentage, and especially in your slugging, but it doesn't know the context. It doesn't know, for example, if your home run was a solo shot or a grand slam. Over the course of a season, those context-independent stats tend to balance out for most teams. Unfortunately, in 1962, the New York Metropolitans Baseball Club was founded, and they don't play by the rules. So what if the Mets had actually scored those 338 theoretical runs they created? Keep in mind, their pitching allowed quite a few runs of their own that year. DeGrom was good, but they didn't have the depth to deal with Syndergaard's Tommy John or Stroman's opt-out. Still, their Pythagorean win-loss record with 308 runs allowed would have been 33 wins and 27 losses. Good enough to comfortably put them in the playoffs. They'd also make the playoffs on base runs, for those of you who know/care about base runs. Context-independent stats, like the Mets' elite average on base and slugging, ignore the concept of sequencing. Imagine a half inning of baseball in which the batting team generates a home run, single, walk, and 3 strikeouts. If that happened, the team triple slash would look like this, no matter what order those events transpired. But the order does matter. The ideal way to sequence these events would be to have the single and walk come before the homer, producing 3 runs with 1 swing. Games are typically won by putting up crooked numbers on the scoreboard. As Hall of Fame Orioles manager Earl Weaver once said, "The key to winning baseball games is pitching, fundamentals, and 3-run homers." A team that hits worse as runners get closer to scoring might instead hit a leadoff homer, followed by the single and walk, then proceed to strike out 3 times in a row. With that sequence, you've only scored 1 run rather than 3, despite having the same average, on base, and slugging. This is the 2020 Mets in a nutshell: elite hitting and terrible sequencing. Now, sequencing is synonymous with luck, the idea being that given a large enough sample size, it would all balance out in the end. And it does, for the most part. If a team could have great sequencing every year, they would have figured out how to do that by now. And front offices would be tripping over themselves to sign last year's best free agents with 2 outs and runners in scoring position. But crazy things can happen in a 60-game season, so there wasn't much room to be unclutch, unlucky, or unlucky for being so unclutch. August 2nd, 2020. We gotta see this sequencing in action. First inning, leadoff walk. Then, a single to right field which allows the runner to advance to third. Great. Runners on the corners, no outs. What happens next? A pop fly too shallow for the runner to tag and score, a walk, and then, with the bases loaded, here comes Robinson Cano, one of their best hitters that season. What a shame. Fourth inning. How about a leadoff single? How about a 102 mile per hour lineout? That's kinda unlucky. Oh look, another single. That ends Kyle Wright's day, so Tyler Matzek gets a fielder's choice groundout from Brandon Nimmo, and Jeff McNeil, a guy known for not striking out, strikes out. 2 more runners stranded. Sixth inning begins with a leadoff double from JD Just Doubles Davis. Dominic Smith full count, he strikes out. Ahmed Rosario does manage a single, but it fails to reach the outfield, meaning Davis can't score from second. And so again, with runners on the corners and 1 out, it's... oh. You get the point. In this game, the Mets had 10 hits and 5 walks, yet didn't score a single run. Can you believe that? They had a hit in all 9 innings and multiple base runners in 5 of them, yet no runs. Where are the runs? Have you seen my runs? I've seemed to have misplaced my runs. You'd have to go back to 2006 to find another 9-inning game in which a team had 10 hits and 5 walks without scoring. The median amount of runs scored by such a performance in 2021 was 7. Some scored way more, like the Giants, who scored 11 runs on 10 hits and 5 walks, including 5 in 1 inning thanks to a Buster Posey bases-loaded walk, followed by an Alex Dickerson grand slam. Let's face it, laughing at the Mets sells. It's low-hanging fruit, but it might be why you clicked on this video. They're basically a lousy soap opera for people who take the 7 train. And while their franchise began with an utterly terrible roster that lost 120 games in 1962, the Mets in more recent years are defined not by lack of talent, rather lack of tangible results from said talent. The Mets have had good players put together good seasons, but it hasn't culminated in a good team. Which is really weird because I just checked Google and it turns out teams are comprised of players. But if you can acknowledge that context-independent stats like average on base and slugging represent talent better than small sample size clutch stats, you can acknowledge that the Mets had an amazing, albeit untimely offense in 2020. As a wise baseball mind once said, The slugging and OPS numbers don't lie. The Mets look good on paper for 2022, having added in free agency, but there are things in baseball that the projection system simply can't account for. For the 2020 Mets, it was sequencing. For the 2021 Mariners, it was overperforming run differential. A computer could have certainly predicted Seattle to score about 700 runs while allowing about 750, but it couldn't have predicted them winning 90 games and doing so. You could correctly predict the WAR of every single player on a roster and still be dead wrong about their record. So there will always be teams with those quirks, and as fans of baseball in general, we have to be weirdly thankful for them. It's why they still play the games. Hey, new patrons, thanks for supporting what I do. To see your name listed here, head on over to patreon.com/foolishbaseball. Also, thank you to Maxo for the music.